YouTube? This is your host, Jay Nabe. This is the podcast episode number 2 of the Careers of Your Peers. I'm here with the wonderful Ava.
Thank you.
So Ava is going to school to be a history teacher so it's like an education degree, and she's going to the local university, Park University. For people who live in Kansas City or in Parkville, you would know about the college. So for people who are interested in going to Park University, explain to them whether you like it or not.
Well, I like it a lot. Because all of the faculty staff members are really super nice and considerate. Because it is a smaller college. And I do have the privilege of being the daughter of a professor that works there. My dad has worked there since like 1998, and now he's the associate dean and the president of the faculty senate. So, even if I wasn't like a daughter of a professor, I think I would still really like the college because it is really nice, and it's so small, so it's like easy to like navigate your way around the campus. Although it is quite of a workout because there are a lot of hills, steep hills that you have to climb up. But overall, I really enjoy going to Park University.
Yeah, there's like crazy stairs at Park, but I think one of the cool aspects is the underground stuff.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, there's a just like a bunch of underground tunnels where some of our classes are held. Actually, I had a few classes underground, but it's pretty nice.
One of the only downsides I can think of is like a lot of flooding and stuff.
Yeah, it is right next to the Missouri River, so if there's a lot of rain, then it would tend to flood a bit. I remember one year while my dad was at work, he went down near the river to help place sandbags down for the upcoming flood. So yeah, that is a downside, but I don't think we experienced too many floods.
But I think another cool thing about Park is like all the different like people that come there from different cultures. It's a very like international school. It's like a big melting pot for sure, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, we do definitely get a lot of international students. I know that there were a lot of students from Brazil, and there's also a lot from African countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, and there was one of my classmates was from another African country, but I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, we do get a lot of diverse students.
Yeah, I definitely know for like the running program, they have a lot of connections with like international schools, and they recruit a lot of like talented athletes. That's definitely one of the cool things, but it's also too much competition for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, Park's a really nice like small school. So that's what kind of differentiates it from like bigger schools like Mizzou or like other state schools.
Yeah,
That's what's really cool, and it's pretty affordable too. And there's like scholarships, so it's definitely a good school to attend. And their food's also good, so that's like one of the top priorities on my thing.
Yeah, they do have good food. They also have good restaurants just nearby the campus. Cause like the campus is right next to downtown Parkville, which is just like a small little cute little area right next to the river, and there's a bunch of nice restaurants and affordable ones.
And they just opened the business school, right?
Oh yes, we do have Park has a new business school, and they just built a new building for it, and then they also have the School of Education, which is my field, and they also have other things that I'm not too familiar with, but Yeah, they do. They have a bunch of opportunities for whatever field you're looking to get into.
So can you explain to the listeners exactly why you chose education versus the other programs at Park?
Well, it really all started like before I honestly before I was even born, because both of my parents are educators. My dad obviously teaches at Park, and my mom, she just retired, but she was a middle school art teacher for about like 25 years. So I was always inspired by my parents to be an educator, and I've always loved learning. I've always loved like discovering new things that I didn't know before, and I'd always like sharing that information with people. So I thought, I mean, maybe I could be put that to use and be a teacher. And yeah. And also another thing that motivated me was sometimes I in school I would have really bad teachers who I didn't like, and I just wanted to prove to them that I could be better than them and that they're actually awful teachers.
I always didn't like the teachers that were like, "Hey, here's your test. You guys are gonna grade it for each other," because I feel like they're making us do their work, like in the classroom.
Yeah, definitely. But I at the same time I can also understand why they would do that, because they do have a lot of work that they need to do just outside of grading papers.
Yeah, but a teacher I had literally made us grade like every single paper.
Every paper?
Yeah, like every test and every paper we ever had. It was all peer grading. But like the
Uh
only downside of that is like you have like the groupies and they're like boosting each other's grades.
yeah, I feel like you could easily um fudge someone's grades.
Let's just put it this way. I don't think anyone failed that class.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So why did you pick history as like the subject you wanted to study?
I mean, I don't know why, but I've just always been so interested in history. I've always been so curious about what life was like before life before life today, and I don't know. I think I've also just been really curious about how did things become the way that they are now. So I just go back and learn about the timeline of human events, and I just think it's really cool. Honestly, I think there are a lot of interesting stories in history that honestly don't get taught enough.
So if you had to pick like one like era or like time in history that you found like to be the most interesting, what would you pick?
That's a really tough question because I'm actually quite interested in a lot of different periods in history. And honestly, it also just like depends on what I'm interested in, whatever week it is. Um, for me, I think ancient civilizations like Egypt, the Indus River Valley, Mesopotamia, those are really interesting. But at the same time, I also like learning about like um the days of colonization and pioneering and maritime explorers. So honestly, just all around, I really like learning just about any period of history. So it's really hard to pick, but I would say ancient history if I had to pick.
So I know there's like a lot of conspiracy theories about like how the pyramids were built. What's your opinion on how the pyramids were built?
Um, well, first of all, those conspiracies are not, are not they're straight up not true. because that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And a lot of people also believe that the period was built by like just a bunch of slaves, which I'm sure that there were slaves that did help with the project, but I know I'm not like an expert in this field. This is just what I remember learning. Um, a lot of the workers were actually like paid individuals who were like good at their jobs, and building. They wanted like the pharaoh. I don't remember which pharaoh it was, but the pharaoh wanted like
The
competent.
pharaoh from Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah,
I'm just
the
kidding.
pharaoh wanted competent workers to build their grave because the pyramid was supposed to be a tomb.
You want to
A
know
tomb.
who really built the pyramids?
Who?
Doctor Strange. Anyway, moving on. So I know you're really into like urban legends. What's like your favorite one that you would want to tell the audience about?
Urban legends. Man, I don't know, cause there's just also such a bunch of different types of urban legends. Um, I'm also just into like kind of like scary stories, and also like true crime. I'm like, I don't know, just kind of weird like that. But I think there are a lot of really interesting Japanese urban legends, because those are terrifying.
You want to know the best Japanese urban legend?
What?
Me, I'm an urban legend.
Okay. So like you don't exist. You're just a myth.
Yeah, I don't exist right now. This thing you're watching is just a figment of your imagination,
Then who am I talking to?
your conscience.
Okay. So yeah, I would definitely say if you're someone who's like really into like spooky stories and urban myths, then
Creepypasta. Creepypasta. Creepypasta.
then you should definitely look into all the Japanese urban legends that they have, because they're pretty interesting.
So you know like how Abe got assassinated, right? Like the Prime Minister of Japan.
Yeah.
They said like the last person who got like a big political person who got assassinated before that was like, I believe it was like 1850s. Don't fact check me, but it was like around that time period. And then the political person got stabbed with like a sword. Like that was the last time Japan had like a big like political assassination, since they have like such tight
I mean,
gun control laws.
yeah, I can believe it. I know that they're no, like I don't know everything about Japan, and I'm not an expert, but I assume that they're mostly a lot more reserved than Americans.
Yeah, they really are. Cause like I've been to New York and I've been to Tokyo, and like New York, they're like honking like all the time. In Tokyo, it's like just dead silent.
Yeah.
It doesn't even feel like a city. Kind of, it's like a country built as a city somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I've also just another part of history that I also like is just I also love learning about different cultures from around the world. So that I think that is partly why I've gotten into urban legends, because of all the creepy urban legends that you hear about from different cultures throughout history and cultures that it still exist today.
So with like teaching, like how you deal with a lot of people and like kids specifically, can you like talk about like how exactly to deal with like students that like don't behave and stuff like that?
Well, I'm still a student myself, so I'm still like learning how to be a teacher, and I haven't done like any field work yet, so I haven't really like done any actual teaching, but
Or like from what you know, since like your parents are teachers, like do you have any like ideas of how that works in like theory?
well, yeah, from what I've learned from my parents, and also just like what I've learned from my education classes, is it really takes a special person to be a proper teacher. You really have to be patient with your students and really put in a lot of work. And you have to like just you just have to be a kind and caring person who's willing to put in a lot of unpaid work for their students. And just like build relationships with your students as well. Like don't just like lecture them every day. You gotta get to know them and their families too. It's also important you get to know their families.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of teachers definitely don't get to know the families that much. They just think that's like one of the more annoying things about their job, because I know there's like some teachers that I had that says like, "Oh, I love my job, but I hate the parents." The parents are always the ones that like make the job so much harder.
Yeah, I mean there are some times where the parents are quite quite rude and quite difficult to deal with. I know my mom at one point, she had a group of boys who were always causing trouble in her class, but their parents never believed what what all the teachers were telling them. They just refused to believe that their kids did anything bad. So
There's definitely some parents like that. My kid is a goody two shoes.
yeah,
My kid will never do anything wrong.
yeah, exactly.
My kid is an angel. All right, enough about that though. But so from your classes that you've been taking, have they been like significantly hard, or what would you say was like the most difficult class?
Well, actually, like in my opinion, education classes are super easy because all you really have to learn about is just how to interact with people and how to interact with your students. You have to know how to interact with students who come from different backgrounds, students who may have gone through trauma, and students who may not have English as their first language, who who may still be learning English. Um, so basically, you just have to prepare to just work with your students. But I would say the hardest class that I had to take for my degree would be uh like probably like psychology classes, like the childhood psychology and lifespan development. But like in reality, those classes weren't really that difficult. You just had a few more assignments than in the education classes.
Maybe you're just a genius. That's why everything's so easy.
That's true. I do like to put in a lot of work for my assignments.
We have the power of the glasses.
Yeah.
It automatically boosts your IQ by 10 points.
Yeah, I'm glad I started wearing glasses before college.
Oh yeah, so I did take like a psychology class in 10th grade, and I thought it was pretty interesting. But I always hated how you had to memorize so much stuff.
Yeah. Memorizing is not proper teaching. You're not actually like learning anything. You're only learning it for a little while until you take the test and then you forget all about it. That's not how teaching should be. You should always have your students interact with the subject matter in different ways. Um, and you should also just like not expect them just to like memorize little minute details because that's really not what's important. What's important is that they understand the bigger picture of everything. And you should like allow them to make mistakes and ask questions and learn from your classroom and
If
your teaching.
if you keep memorizing things and like storing all this stuff in your head, you're gonna become an AI like Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I mean, memorizing does work for some students because people have different ways they like to learn, but you can't expect that every single one of your students will learn the exact same way that you do or someone else does.
The
So,
best teachers I ever had were the ones that taught like the same like information in different ways for the students to learn, like visually,
yeah.
like, and then like verbally, and like moving while learning at the same time. Like those are very effective ways to teach.
Yeah, that is exactly what you are supposed to do as a teacher. You're supposed to use many different forms of learning styles when you're teaching the same topic just over and over. Just have them do multiple activities that include the same subject to allow your students to really get a full grasp of what's going on in the classroom.
And I definitely like as a teacher, you need to have a good attitude because I definitely had teachers that would like come into the classroom and act like we were wasting the teacher's time, even though they're supposed to be there for us.
Yeah, teachers do need a lot of patience, honestly, and they need to have quite good like social skills as well. I wouldn't say I'm the best at being social, but I would say I'm more patient compared to other people. And I think I'm more understanding to to my students. Or I don't have any students, but my future students, because you never know what's going on in their lives, and you just gotta really be patient with them, and don't treat them like they're some kind of nuisance to you. Because I mean, sometimes students can be a nuisance if they're not behaving, but you don't want them to feel like a nuisance.
So I know there's like different types of history you can teach in school. What kind of history do you want to teach?
I was thinking more about teaching American history because that's just something that I'm just super familiar with. And I feel like it'd be a bit easier for me to teach. And I also just think that learning about the history of our nation is very important. I mean, learning about the history of everything is important, but like specifically, if you're gonna learn about only one point in history, then maybe you should learn about the history of the nation that you're living in.
My biggest issue with history classes was that they never talked about current events.
Yeah, that is that is a biggest mistake on their part because talking about current events and how it relates to points in history is a very good way to get your students to fully grasp what people at the time were going through in a certain point in history. And it also just keeps your students like more engaged so they have a better understanding of just what's going on.
I feel like it's definitely more interesting that way too, because like especially for me, like you hear about like all these things that happened like so long ago. It's kind of hard to like pay attention to it because you're kind of like, how does it like? Why does it matter to me? Like I'm not in that time era. Like why would I need to learn all these like seemingly useless facts?
Yeah, you really need to relate all of your subject matter to real world experiences that your students are going through. That's something else I learned in one of my education classes is you really have to like find a way to relate the subject matter to your students.
Yeah, the worst history classes I ever took were kind of like, here's the textbook, and it's like memorize these terms at the end of the chapter. And it's like that's the end of class. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I feel like history teachers like that are the reason why a lot of people are turned off by history because they just think it's so boring. Because they had a boring history class, but really it's fascinating to learn about what life was like back then. At least to me, it's fascinating. And I'm it's kind of sad that there are a lot of history teachers that just make you memorize certain terms and dates because that's just not the proper way to learn history.
Yeah, I definitely like the majority of my history teachers will definitely like teach from the textbooks. That's probably why I kind of didn't pay attention a lot. I don't know as much history as I should, but that's definitely like something that should be worked on. I feel like in teaching in general is trying to avoid using too much of the textbook because I feel like teachers use the textbook too much like as a crutch because they don't actually know the material themselves. So they kind of just like point to the book and they're like telling the students like to learn the rest of it, which I feel like isn't fair. And a lot of students don't really learn that way.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like textbooks should be used as like more of like a tool for teaching, not like just to what you should use as teaching. You should like use it as like a reference to what you are teaching. Like maybe like have your students read a bit of it so that they can get a better understanding, especially if they learn better through reading information. But like you definitely should not and I feel like this goes for like every sort of class. You definitely should not rely on the textbook too much, and you should use other forms of educating your students and like just like really get them engaged into the subject matter instead of just having them sit there and read from a book, because that is quite boring.
Yeah, because I know like in my when I was in school, I always did better in the classes where the teachers taught really well. And it didn't really matter like what they were teaching or like the subject matter. It just really depended on how the teacher was teaching. But that was like what it was across the board. 'Cause I know there's some classes where the teachers just didn't like teach at all, and they're like, "Oh wow, why is there so many students failing?" But I'm like, if you expect students to like self study, like I had this teacher who expected everyone to self study in 8th grade. Like I don't think that's a realistic goal at all. And they were like, "Oh, I'm preparing you for college," but like, how do you prepare for college in 8th grade? I feel like that's kind of like
Yeah.
raising the bar too high.
Honestly, from my experience going through middle school and high school, they made it seem like college was going to be like so stressful and like so hard, but really it's not. This is this is like one of the easiest and most laid back points in my in my life right now. But yeah, I do feel like teachers do put a lot of expectations onto their student. They're just so unrealistic. Like you cannot just expect your students to fall into a certain habit of studying, because they might not just learn very well from studying, or they might also have other things going on at home, which is also why I hate homework. I'm against homework. I think it's stupid. Um you should really, like, yeah, you should encourage your students to look at the subject matter outside of class, but you shouldn't, I don't think you should expect them to really put in time and effort into your class, because their world does not revolve around your class. You they have a life of their own, and they have other things that they want and need to do. So,
Another big thing is when like teachers like assign like crazy amounts of homework because they don't think you have like a life outside of school. Because there's a lot of students that do extracurricular activities, and like you can't put too much on their plate. I think that's part of what's like contributing to like the increase in suicides or like a lot of anxiety and like depression in school. And that seems to be something that some teachers don't understand. Like they just keep piling up homework. And another thing is like when teachers don't collaborate with each other, and just like you have like 3 or 4 tests in a day, or like you have these like seemingly unreachable amounts of work, or like unachievable amounts of work, I should say, that the teachers give you.
yeah, that is definitely another annoying thing that some teachers do. Honestly, when I started taking education classes, I thought back to the students I had while I was in public school, and I thought, did any of my teachers like take any of these classes? Because this because they were all so bad at like properly educating their students. They just expected, like, they were stuck in the old ways of teaching, of just having the students sit in the classroom and look at a chalkboard or whatever. And I do feel like it's slowly getting better in terms of education, because now more young teachers are coming in who are more like properly educated in how to properly teach students of with different needs. And I think it is super important to understand that homework is it's just it's just dumb. I hate homework. I hate it so much. It just takes too much time away from a kid's life, and I feel like it just stresses them out too much. And the last thing they need is more stress.
So, what's your opinion on teachers that give pop quizzes all the time?
Um, well, as a student, I find that quite annoying. Um, And also, if I think it just depends on like how they use the pop quiz, because there are some teachers that like have a pop quiz and then they grade the quiz and that affects the student's grade. But I don't think it should be used that way. I think it should be used as a form of trying to get a gauge of where all of your students are at and seeing what you need to uh address more than other things. Like, see, like, do my students understand everything that we've been discussing, or are some of them still struggling with what we've been talking about? Like, use it as just a formative assessment where you see how well your students are doing, and you don't have that affect their grade in any way.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point that I didn't think about, but I definitely agree with that statement. Like another thing, like one of my pet peeves about like, especially when you get into like high school, like junior, senior year of high school, the fact that like the teachers and the counselors are always pushing to go to college, but they don't talk about the other options that are out there for students, such as going to like the Air Force or the military, or like also going into like tech schools,
Yeah.
stuff like that, or just going for an associates, which I guess is technically still college, but like not like a full 4 year bachelor's degree. Like some people already like have a business or already like in a certain industry where they are somewhat successful already, and they would probably be better off pursuing that than going to debt. So what's your opinion on high schools trying to push college all the time?
Well, I think it's quite dumb and quite unfair. They really make it seem like if you don't go to college, you're a failure, when that's not true. You can There are definitely many job opportunities that you can have without going to college, and you can definitely make like good money by not going to college. I think schools put way too much pressure on college. Like, if a student is planning on going to college, then yes, help them prepare for college. But like, if they already know that they want to go to like a trade school and learn how to do something at a trade school, I don't exactly know what you
Basket
learn.
weaving. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
Then you shouldn't pressure them too much into going to like a 4 year college, especially if they if the college is like super expensive, and then they'll go into student debt, which is a big issue right now.
Yeah, I feel like this doesn't get mentioned much, but I think the main reason why like high schools try to push for students to go to college is it looks good for their school. Because you know, like how like not teachers, how parents look at like the school and it says, oh, blah 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 percent of our graduates went to a 4 year college, or blah 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 percent of our students went to a 2 year college. We got like this many people who completed college. Like it's in their best interest to get more students to go to college because it looks better for them, but they're not really looking out for the students most of the time, I feel like.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue. Like, sometimes the school administrators focus more on how the school looks than how the students actually feel about the school. uh yeah, I definitely think that a lot of administrators should really shift their focus into what they're doing. And I also believe that school administrators should be teachers before they ever become administrators, because there are some administrators and principals who have never taught before, and they don't fully understand what it's like to be a teacher, which is pretty dumb if you ask me. So,
Yeah, I would almost argue it might be better to get like a job straight out of high school and then save up money to go to college later. Because I feel like you would have more chances to be more successful in college when you're more mature too. Because like there's a lot of people going to college when they're really young, but I feel like at the same time that might not be the right point in their life to be going to college. I think that's why you see all these incidents of like parties and a lot of people like dying from like hazing or like all these drugs issues and stuff like that. I think it's mostly because the students are too young to know what they're actually doing, and they're not mature enough to understand like the value of education and like exactly why they're there to study. I think that's one of the big issues that need to be discussed, because I think students, and another big thing is students are like making big decisions with their lives when they're only like 17 or 18. And like at that point in like your life, you're not going to know what you want to do. And like you're making these decisions where it's going to affect you for pretty much the rest of your life, which I feel like is extremely unfair and it should be changed.
Yeah, we definitely do put like way too much pressure on the kids about figuring out what they're gonna do for the rest of their life, and that's just not healthy because they should have time to mature on their own. Like, I mean, of course, they should be like pushed in the right direction, but some kids just aren't ready for college once they graduate high school, or sometimes kids just aren't. They just don't like college. Like, college just isn't for them. So I really do feel like we put way too much pressure on kids going to college, and also just the idea of I think it's called like Greek life, the fraternities and sororities. I mean, I kind of feel like those also like makes college look more fun and like freeing, which is true, but like sometimes students choose the college they go to simply because of a sorority or a fraternity or the type of parties that they have, when really you should be picking a college for the type of education that you want. And if you don't know what you want to do but you still want to go to college, you should still focus on the percentage rates of students graduating and just how well the college is at actually educating their students, and not just look at the party scene of a university.
A strategy I'm a huge fan of is taking like a gap year between high school and college and just trying out different things, like going to a different country or like trying out different things. Like make a list of things you think you're interested in, and if you like intern or like attempt to do it and you find it interesting and it requires the college degree, that's when I would decide to go to college. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like it's just different for everybody, and just they should just do what they want to do. Like, if they just don't feel ready to go to college right after high school, then they should take some time to just really discover who they are, because you after you graduate high school, you still don't really know who you are. You're still trying to figure yourself out. And there's so much pressure on you to already know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So yeah, I definitely feel like their students should have more options than just go to college, and more just like more suggestions than college.
Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap up the podcast here, but is there anything you want to tell the people who are interested in getting to education, or anything you want to shout out, anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I would say it takes a special kind of person to be a teacher, and if you're going into teaching, then you have to make sure you're really patient and really understanding of your students, and be willing to put in a lot of hard work for your students. Don't just be a teacher because you get the summers off. Be a teacher because you want to inspire your students. And that's all I have to say.
I thought about being a teacher because I wanted the summers off, but that's why I'm not a teacher now.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're not a teacher.
I probably would be a good teacher though, but we'll see. I may or may not do it in the future. Only time will tell.
Yep.
If I have students in the future, hi. Okay, well, I'll wrap up today's episode of the podcast. I hope y'all learned a lot. But yeah, that'll wrap it up. So we'll see you next time. Peace.